حي على الفلاح.
Tunisian history is long and rich, owing to the fact that the territory of modern-day Tunisia was home to many diverse cultures. The recorded history of Tunisia goes back to the ancient times when the coast of North Africa began to be colonized. The Phoenicians founded Carthage. In time, the Carthaginians built an empire in the Mediterranean. However, they came into conflict with Rome. Carthage was destroyed. However, the Romans later rebuilt Carthage as a Roman city. Under Roman rule, Tunisia prospered. However, by the 5th century, the Roman Empire was crumbling. A people called the Vandals had conquered Spain. In 429 CE, 80,000 Vandals, led by Genseric, crossed to North Africa. In 439 CE, they captured Carthage and created a new kingdom. In 533 CE, Byzantine Emperor Justinian sent an army under his general Belisarius, which crushed the Vandals and took Carthage. The Islamic conquest began, a new chapter in Tunisian history. Arab Muslims from Egypt conquered much of North Africa in the mid-7th century AD. The Arabs defeated both the Byzantines and the local Berber armies to establish their rule in the region. Tunisia's history dates back to the Neolithic times, the Stone Age. Anthropologists have found evidence indicating that the coastal area was populated by hunters and fishermen, as well as farmers. The various nomadic peoples who eventually settled in the area came to be called Berbers. The Phoenician, Roman, Greek, Byzantine, and Arab conquerors all attempted to defeat or assimilate the Berbers into their cultures, with varying degrees of success. In time, several Berber kingdoms were created that vied with each other for power until the arrival of the Romans in 24 AD. The Roman conquest was disastrous for the Berbers. Tribes were forced to become settled or leave the area. For this reason, the Berbers continuously resisted Roman rule. The Romans began their occupation by controlling the coastal lands and cultivating the area. It is estimated that the Roman province of Africa produced 1 million tons of cereals each year for the Roman Empire, along with fruits, figs, grapes, beans, and olive oil. Along with the Roman presence, Judaism and Christianity began appearing among the Berbers. Many Jews who had been expelled from Palestine by the Romans settled in the area, and some Berber tribes converted to Judaism. Christianity arrived in the 2nd century AD and was especially attractive to slaves. By the end of 4th century, much of the settled areas had become Christian. The most influential conquest in the area was the invasion of Arab Muslims between 642 CE and 669 CE. The Byzantines, with their stronghold at Carthage, ruled the coasts. Inland, Berber tribes controlled the oases. Arab general Amr ibn al-As radiallahu anh, who was sent to take control of Alexandria in 643 CE, 11 years after the death of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, afterward kept going west. With him was a nephew, a young officer named Uqba ibn Nafi R. According to Arabic sources, Amr ibn al-As sent his nephew on at least one raid south into central Libya. Though the Arab army was unable to hold onto any of the coastal ports and towns, Ibn Nafi's experience proved valuable. 27 years later, the Caliphate, by then based in Damascus, decided to resume the campaign into North Africa. One of its goals was to establish a permanent base. Caliph Muawiyah appointed Ibn Nafi' to lead it. Ibn Nafi''s chosen site lay on an inland plain 1 day's march from the sea, a safe distance from the Byzantine navy, and at an equally cautious remove from the highlands sheltering Berber tribes that variously allied with and fought the Arabs. Ibn Nafi' named his site Al-Qayrawan, which Arabized the Persian word for caravan and today carries an English meaning close to garrison camp. Early Arab historians recount the site had been previously settled by both Romans and Byzantines, but it had fallen to ruin. It proved an intelligent strategy. After constructing a large mosque and government house, it was from Kairouan that 12 years later Ibn Nafi and an Arab army set out farther west. He reached as far as the Moroccan coast. His success helped leaders who followed to envision what became the further expansions of Muslim Arab power. Kairouan became the headquarters and the essential junction towards the rest of northern Africa, only outranked by Mecca, Medina, and Jerusalem. It is venerated as the fourth holy city in the Muslim world, whose cultural and scholastic influence has, since the 9th century, extended to the fringes of Europe. Al-Qayrawan became a great center of learning, attracting students from all over the world. In the 10th century, Constantius Africanus, a Christian from Carthage, went to Italy and introduced the advanced Islamic learning to Europe. The works of the ancient Greeks, which had been translated long ago by the Arabs and studied as major texts, were now translated into Latin, thus reintroducing the Greek works to Europe. The Qayrawan Great Mosque, towering high above the many mosques that crowd the city, is Masjid al-Kabir, the Great Mosque, also called the Masjid of Uqba. Its cornerstone was laid in 670 AD by Uqba ibn Nafi as the first house of worship in North Africa. It has been revered as one of the most holy mosques in the world. Its style and aura of holiness have for centuries influenced other religious buildings throughout the western lands of Islam. This mosque is the oldest and most prestigious sanctuary in the Muslim West, with the oldest standing minaret in the world. It is also considered the masterpiece of Islamic art and architecture. The second important Arab Islamic urban center is the city of Tunis, Tunisia's capital. Tunis, the Green, was the capital of the Muslim Caliphate in the Maghrib, reaching a period of unrivaled prosperity and economic, cultural, and social growth. Tunis was rebuilt under the Roman Emperor Augustus in the 1st century AD, but it didn't have the importance that Carthage had previously enjoyed. The Muslims refortified it in 720 CE and built the Zaytuna Mosque. The city was used as an administrative center and as a garrison town subordinate to Qayrawan. Its main role was to supply the Muslim army, protecting the settlements of Sicily and southern Italy. Meanwhile, the Zaytuna Mosque and University were preparing religious teachers to preach and teach new converts, while other teachers were being sent to Andalusia, Cordoba, and Sicily. The Berbers, also known as the Amazigh, converted en masse as tribes and assimilated juridically to the Arabs, writes Professor Hodgson. He then comments that the Berbers were to play a role in the West parallel to that played by the Arabs elsewhere in Islam. For centuries, the Berbers had lived as semi-pastoralists in or near arid lands at the fringe of civilization, sustaining their isolated identity somewhat like the Arabs. The Maghrib, islanded between Mediterranean and Sahara, was to the Berbers what Arabia was to the Arabs. Hodgson explains, although the Berbers enjoyed more rainfall than the Arabs, their higher mountains made their settlements likewise difficult to access. And though the imperial Roman cities were more proximus, those cities never incorporated the countryside with a network of market towns, but instead remained aloof from the indigenous rural Berbers. However, some Berbers continued to offer fierce resistance. The Jarawa tribe, for example, led by a woman called by the Arabs the prophetess, Dihya, attacked the Muslim troops continuously without threatening their base in Qayrawan. In 696, she defeated the Arabs at Tebessa, which is now part of Algeria, but she eventually fell in Al-Jem. After the fall of the Umayyad Caliphate in Damascus in 750, Berber disorder increased in North Africa. The quick establishment of the Abbasid Caliphate in Baghdad in 750 helped little to contain the unrest. The geographical distance to the capital of the caliphate also bothered some of the Arabs in Tunisia, who were disturbed by the caliphate's meddling in what they considered regional affairs. During the increasing unrest, a provincial leader, Ibrahim ibn al-Aghlab, led an army which he managed to enforce stability in Ifriqiya. When he had re-established stability, Ibn al-Aghlab was awarded the title of Amir. He and his descendants ruled Tunisia from 800 to 909. Under Aghlabid rule, the economy of Tunisia improved markedly. The water system was improved to supply towns and promote the growing olive trees and other agricultural products. Trade routes were established that connected Tunisia with the interior of the continent, including Sudan and the Sahara. Sea routes linked to Tunisia to Alexandria and Egypt, which would soon become a main destination for merchants. Despite the relative prosperity of the population at that time, the rule was not popular amongst Arabs or Berbers. The unpopularity can be attributed to several mutually reinforcing factors. The perceived lack of legitimacy of the administration which ruled from such a great distance in Baghdad, the un-Islamic way of life of many of its rulers, and the disrespect they showed Berbers who converted to Islam. Such practices were contrary to the dominant Maliki school of Islam in Tunisia. To the west of Aghlabi lands, the Kharijites under Abdurrahman ibn Rustum established a Rustumid kingdom from 761 to 909. The leaders were elected by the leading citizens of the town and gained a reputation for honesty and justice. There was much support for scholarship, astronomy, astrology, theology, and law. By the end of 9th century, Ismaili Muslims, Shia Muslims who followed a more esoteric and mystical interpretation of Islam, led a revolt against the established Sunni rulers in Tunisia and the west of North Africa. In 909, the Ismaili forces established the Fatimid dynasty in North Africa, first at Al-Qayrawan and later in Cairo, Egypt. In 909, both the Rustumid kingdom and the Aghlabid province of Tunisia were conquered by the Fatimids. The newly emerging Fatimid movement grew in strength and numbers. The Fatimids eventually managed to capture Qayrawan in 909, forcing the last of the Aghlabid line to evacuate the palace of Raqadda. Concurrently, the Rustumid state was overthrown. On the east coast of Tunisia, facing Egypt, the Fatimids built a new capital on top of ancient ruins, calling the seaport Mahdiya after their Mahdi. The city flourished until the Fatimids moved their capital in the latter part of the 10th century to Cairo in Egypt. Nevertheless, independent kingdoms did manage to establish themselves in the area. The greatest of these were the Almoravids, the Almohads, the Hafsids, and the Zayanids. These kingdoms were all led by Muslim leaders who greatly encouraged learning and the arts. The golden age of Tunis was between the 13th and 16th centuries under the Hafsid dynasty, when it reached its pinnacle of greatness. The Hafsid dynasty guaranteed relative prosperity through the increase in regional trade, especially between the Sahara and the Sudan, and with the Mediterranean countries, including the Europeans, with whom the Hafsids exchanged ambassadors. Practices and laws were developed throughout the region to regulate trade. Shipping practices were improved to ensure efficient sea trade, and Tunis, Mahdiya, Gabes, and Jerba became the most important ports in what is now Tunisia. Islamic law was enriched and extended in order to guarantee moral issue and regulated trading through, for example, enhanced security in the marketplace, the principles of fair dealing, and the supervision of important business practices. In the 16th century, Tunisia found itself at crossroads. The weakening power of the Hafsid dynasty was encroached on by the powerful Ottomans from the east and the Spanish from the west. The struggle between the Ottoman and the Spanish for control over North Africa ended with the victory of the Ottomans. The Ottoman Empire controlled Tunisia through appointed governors or beys for the next 250 years. However, by the beginning of the 1800s, real power was in the hands of the beys, who had established the Hussein dynasty. The conquering Arabs and their later illustrious dynasties, the Turks, and above all, the Andalusian Muslims, expelled from their paradise in Arab Spain, all had a hand in the creations of these historic but living treasures. Surrounded by the walls of ancient cities, they, along with the colorful souks, offer modern visitors their 1,001 enchanted secrets. Today, Islam is the official state religion in Tunisia. 99.1% of its adherents are Sunni Muslims. The predominant madhab in the country is the Maliki school.